All right. And we'll go find more risk management stuff. So this is all about their risk management process. And we teach it in MCE also. And the two are similar, not exactly the same. So develop risk mitigation plans that align with organizational risk tolerance. So you need to know, what is the risk tolerance of the organization? How much risk is the company willing to accept, and how much risk can it actually bear? So we're in a very conservative company, so not much. We do take a lot of risks on developing new trucks, but not on our supply base. For supplier management, the focus is on supply risk or line down situations. And some situations where supply risk is increased include things like sole source or single source. All suppliers located in the same geographical area, which is like prone to flooding or earthquakes. There's limited supply of the part in the industry, which we run into a lot. There's only one or two players. Specifications have extremely tight tolerances, which then will reduce the number of people that can actually produce that part. And long lead time and high variability in demand. Spoilage is also a problem if you're in like the food business. Mitigation of these risks has some associated costs, so the company must determine whether that cost exceeds the potential benefit of the risk mitigation. So you're going to have to do something to mitigate the risk, and it's probably going to cost you some money to do that thing. Is it worth it, basically? So the March 2011 tsunami in Japan shined a spotlight on risk management. Well, so did the pandemic, but this was written before that. Many companies discovered that they really did not have well-formulated plans in place. And interestingly enough, 9 years later, they still didn't. Found out that they had very little visibility in the supply base beyond the first tier, which is very common, and certainly the case here. Many companies use this as an opportunity to audit their supply chains and identify the probability of risk factors occurring and to develop the plans and mitigate them. So the process that they're recommending. So most companies have a high level of dependence on the supply base, and if the supplier has problems, so does the customer. So risk planning, you want to plan for the highest impacts first that are most likely to happen. A risk to the company is an event that will reduce revenue or earnings to the company. So that's our definition of a risk. Here's the ISM theory. So under risk assessment or risk analysis, you have 3 steps. You identify the risk, you estimate the probability of occurrence, how regular an event is it, and you estimate the likelihood of impact. How badly is it going to hurt? Is it going to cost a lot of money? Is it only going to cost a little money? That's risk assessment. Then you develop a risk profile, develop risk management strategies, allocate resources. This is risk mitigation. Allocate resources, execute the strategy, and review the results. So let's go through this little model they got here. So step 1 is identify the sources of risk. This is part of risk assessment. This theory identifies major categories of risk and then identifies specific risks in each category. So brand or reputational risk, business continuity, all these risks down here. We go into a little more detail on how to do this in the MCE class, because just sitting down thinking about this, you often get stumped. Once you have the risks, you estimate the probability of the occurrence of each of these risks. This is still part of risk assessment. So it's dependent on the environment built by the suppliers and the customers within the network. So here's where your probabilities can range from A, very high, down to F, almost impossible. Or you can use a 1 to 10 scale. A lot of people use that, 10 being very high. Define the supplier network commodity category and define history of disruption. Experts provided rough possibilities. Oftentimes insurance companies that are property casualty insurers will have stuff. Assign specific suppliers a likelihood of specific events. So you're defining the likelihood that this event will occur. Event probability. What is the likelihood of a supply chain disruption event in this specific network? So this is a kind of a typical depiction of a network. So this would be PACCAR, the network organizer. And the red guys are your tier one suppliers. And then the tier twos feed the tier ones, and the tier threes feed the tier twos. And what you'll notice here is this tier three guy, he may be making titanium bolts or something like that, but there's only one of them. And they feed the whole supply chain. So if he has a problem, this whole supply chain is going to have a problem. Step 3 is estimate the likely impact on company revenue. So this is the last step of risk assessment. If the event were to occur in the future, what would be the effect on the company's revenue? Would it be catastrophic or simply an annoyance? Or again, you can use a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being catastrophic. Step 4 is develop the risk profile. So it captures all the exposures and shows the risk aversion level. And I'll show you what it looks like in a minute here, but decisions about how to manage different levels of risk will emerge. In order to put this profile together, you got to determine the company's tolerance for risk or risk boundary, identify potential risks, and assess them along 2 dimensions, likelihood and impact. So this is the heat map. So you got impact, they're doing categorical here, 1 through 4, with 4 being not so severe and 1 being very severe. And then likelihood of high with alpha and low with Fox. And then here is the risk boundary in yellow. Well, it's actually in blue here. So once you cross over that, you're into what the company considers a very risky scenario, and they want to do some mitigation. So right now you're looking at this. You got risk 1 here. This is maybe risk of a stock out or something like that. And then you got risk 2 here, which could be risk of a flood or a fire to the supplier. And you notice 1 is really looking good. It's low risk. And even if it does happen, it's more of an annoyance than anything else. But this one is a problem because it's very high risk. It's likely to occur. And it's not catastrophic, but it's going to hurt. So step 5 is develop risk management strategies. Challenges to balance risk against opportunities presented. So common strategies, what attributes of the supplier are causing the high risk score? So here's your basic 4 things you can do with risk. You can accept it, you can mitigate it, you can transfer it, or you can avoid it. And this one just kind of adds another couple more in there, but those are the 4 basic ones. Transference is usually insurance. Mitigation, you have to come up with a plan. Acceptance is the do nothing strategy. And then avoidance is just saying we're not going to participate in that. So after your mitigation strategies, what you've done is you've taken some of the resources away from 2 and applied them to 1. So you brought 1 back over the risk boundary, but you made 2 more risky. So you've increased the severity and the likelihood that 2 will occur, but you've decreased the severity and likelihood that 1 will occur. So that's your heat map, or your risk profile is what ISM calls it. So degree of control. Determine the degree of control that the members of the company have over the risk. So this is also in the insurance company, it's called assurance. And you've got exogenous risks and endogenous risks. So exogenous means without, risks that we have no control over, natural disasters and all that. And then endogenous is within building codes, risks we have control over. Then you've got a couple of risk terms. You got inherent risk. So this is the initial risk before we do any mitigation. It's just likelihood, the risk and likelihood times impact. And then you've got residual risk. So this is after we've done the mitigation and we've moved to here. This is our residual risk here. It's the adjusted risk of likelihood times impact times assurance. And I'll show you what that kind of looks like in our PFMEA, but the amount of risk that we are stuck with to gain the opportunity, you can't mitigate it away. So you got risk classifications, high and low. And then you got to allocate resources. Like I said, in that example, we're taking them from 2 and applying them to 1. Cash for hedging, redundant tooling, dual sourcing, etc. Execute strategy, human technical capital resources, and then review results. So how is a commodity manager going to accomplish all this? Good question. What we teach in MCE is the PFMEA, which is kind of a handy little guy, if I can find it here. Well, I'll just go like this. Should pop up. There's our PFMEA. So you got the process, step, ID, potential failure mode, and if you're in engineering, I know you're very familiar with this. So you got severity, which is probability in ISM speak, and occurrence, which is impact. And then you got, trying to remember what they call this, detection, what we're going to call this. So this is assurance. How likelihood is it you're going to detect it before it happens? And then you multiply all 3 of them together for the risk score. But here, we're talking about actions, recommended actions, and then you redo the risk score and you come up with an adjusted RPM. This is a book that talks about risk and how to kind of figure out what the risks are. It has a little bunch of stuff. We go through it in the MCE class. And this is another way of looking at risk. This is an article from ISM's, a few pages on their process. It's not bad. And their process looks like this. They've got the same kind of spreadsheet. It's not the same as our PFMEA, but it's pretty close. Likelihood, impact, and then proposed mitigation, budget requirements, and then you reevaluate it after you mitigate the risk. And this is directions for that, which just kind of talks about ISM and how you do it. And then risk monitoring and control. So QA guys will get all over you for this. This is the article on the monthly metric. Monitoring and control, you have to have some plan on how you're going to monitor it so you can detect it. Some risks need to only be checked annually. Others, such as quality and delivery, should be checked weekly. Or once the assessment of the supply chain network has been set up, the company must identify which factors and who monitors the planned response, all that good stuff. Compliance requirements. Examples of compliance requirements are supplier must carry a certain level of inventory, it must produce an item at more than one facility, it must maintain certain safety standards. All this is based on their written contracts usually. And then product end of life. So the product roadmap details plans for a company's product, include all these kind of things. And then you've got specifications to say how to make the product. And then you got both roadmaps and specifications should be kept up to date, always an issue. And the main concern of supply base is availability when you're going to end life. This is like our 1.9 meter cab parts. Some of the possible strategies, it could be part of a supply continuation plan, alternate suppliers or materials, substitute products, or supplier development of new or very small suppliers. End of life cycle of company's own products. This would be our trucks. You got to look at the risk of having inventory for products that are no longer offered. And this, we get used on this pretty regularly. They just quit offering the truck and we got inventory all through the pipeline. And the risk can be mitigated by effective and continuous internal communication, which is sometimes pretty poor in this outfit between marketing, product development, and manufacturing. All right. What level are risk management procedures most often developed? Hmm. This is just looks like a nonsense term to me. I think that's too narrow, so it's got to be one of these two. I would probably go with individual sites just because it sounds more like what they're talking about. Let's see what these guys say. A, it is individual sites. Consider at many levels, including an organization, but however, it is done at the individual site. Corporate function areas are not normally used as a basis for development of risk management. I disagree with that. Okay. Okay, a major metropolitan transit authority has been purchasing fluorescent bulbs from only two suppliers for the past several years. Supply professional has become concerned that this concentration of spend puts the transit authority at high risk should one supplier no longer be able to deliver the quantities required. We'd be without light bulbs. Safety issue, I guess. All of the following risk mitigation strategies might be considered, except which one of these does not belong with the others? Uh, I think this one's pretty easy. Probably going to be a C.
Yeah, see, I think C too.
Yeah, because the other three are kind of go together and C kind of stands out.
Like you're funneling just to one as opposed to everything else.
Yeah, better be C. Yep, C it is. All right, there's 6 questions out there. We'll go over answers at 3:55. If you don't get done before that, raise your hand when you get done. All right, go over some answers here. Number one is Charlie. Alignment of interests with suppliers throughout an organization's supply chain fosters more successful relationships. 2 is Delta. Issue at hand is developing a supply continuation plan. 3 is Alpha. Process of identification of risk issues is risk analysis. Or I don't remember the other name for it. Risk assessment. 4 is Delta. Risk transference is shifting the exposure to the suppliers. That's what hedging or insurance does. 5 is also Alpha. Or is Alpha. 4 was what? Delta, yeah. Correct, because it is the correct procedure to follow that leads from identifying. So yeah, I mean, this is one where the longest answer wasn't right, but they just kind of embellished the same thing. So you got to kind of guess at it. And 6 is also Alpha. Annoyance risks are those that occur frequently but only have a small impact. All right. We'll look at that's all we got for risk. I think we got breaches of contract tomorrow. See ya.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep.